Alright, you're welcome to today's video. In this video we're going to be making the bubu that you've seen on the thumbnail and I'm sure in the video at the beginning of the video. So to begin, I have 4 yards of fabric on the table. Now this is a bubu, so it can be worn by a very wide range of sizes. So to begin, I have 4 yards here. 4 yards is going to be enough for this project. But before we start doing anything, I'm going to measure out 1.5 yards. I'm going to cut that and keep that aside. That 1.5 yards will be used for things like our sleeves, the belts, and the collar that we have, because you can see that this bubu has a collar. That's the whole thing it has going on. Alright, so when you've made that cut, take out the 1.5 yards and keep it aside for later. Okay, so after you have taken away the 1.5 yards, you're going to be left with about 2.5 yards. So what we're going to do is you're going to divide these 2.5 yards into two. Now the reason why we're dividing the 2.5 yards into two is because we intend to use one side of the 2.5 for the front and the other side for the back. So that's why we need to divide this. So go ahead and separate this so that you end up with 2 pieces. So now after you have divided them, you are going to have 2 pieces. Like I said before, one is the front and one is the back. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to join them at the top so that we create our shoulder line. Okay, so if you have a fabric similar to what I have here, which is the best fabric you should buy for this style, because we have a front that fades, we have a top part. We have a top part that fades into creating a bottom part, and if we're going to use the bottom to create the neck part, so you should have a fabric that has some sort of gradients. Now by gradient I mean the fade from one color to another, or from a fade from let's say if we had blue, so we'll have like sky blue up here fading into like a navy blue or something. But you can sew this with whatever fabric. I'm just saying personally I feel it to look better like this. And this is, in case you are wondering, you need to make this from a fabric like brocade or damask, something that's similar to that, in order to get the feel that you've seen mine having. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to join them here. I'm going to turn it to the wrong side. So this is the wrong side. I'm going to flip it like so. So this is my front side. This is my front side. I'm going to keep it front facing front, and then I'm going to stitch this part together. By making this stitch, I would have created a shoulder line, and that will allow us to start creating our neckline. Alright, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spread and iron it. Alright, so after I have ironed my lines so that I get everything nice and flat, we're going to fold it front side facing front side, and at this point you can select whatever part you want. After you turn it inside out, first of all, make sure this is the wrong side facing you. You can at this point decide if you want from this line here to be the front, or like basically from this point on, once I make a cut, this is the point where front and back will be decided. So if you have a fabric where you want this side specifically to be the front, take note. But for me, the side that will be my front finally is the side that's facing down here. So if you have like a pattern or a design or something you are trying to show, this is a very good time to decide where you want to use. Alright, so yeah, after that is done, select where you want to be the front. Basically just arrange everything on the table. Make sure that this line here stays in the same place at all times. Okay. After you folded it neatly, I'm just going to iron the line down here so that I always know where the center of my front and center of the back is. So after we've made this ironing, the next step will be to cut our collar. So you've seen that this bubu has a collar as if it were a shirt, so we're going to need to treat it that way. Now most women have small necks, but if you're a person with a bust that is, reaching above 45 inches, I would use 16 for your neck. But for everybody below that, for the purpose of what we are doing, you are free to use between 14.5 and 15 inches. If you are on the smaller side, so you have a bust of, let's say, 33 to 34, sorry, 32 to like 34, use 14.5. But for everybody else in between that, all the way to 45 inches for your bust, use a neckline of 15 inches for this particular project. So what we're going to do with that 15 inches is we're going to divide that 15 inches in half. 15 inches divided by half divided by 2 is 7.5. 7.5 minus 1 is 6.5. I'm going to use 6.5 to make a curve around this neck. Now you're going to make sure that when you're making the curve, you push only half inch of that 6.5 into the back. You will see the way I'm curving it now. I'm going to zoom in. So I'm going to use 6.5 to make a curve, and you want only half an inch of that to touch that back part there. So after I've gotten the point, I'm going to simply just mark around to get a rough. I don't know if you can see this, the way my chalk looks. I think you can. So connect the lines together. So you can see I use 6.5 to make a curve. Now if you look towards the back, you will see that only half inch of that my neckline was given to the back. So you want to make sure you push most of the excess into the front and a bit into the side. Don't come too deep into the side. For what I'm doing here, my depth, this is barely 2 inches from the edge here to this joining here, barely 2 inches. So you want to make sure you don't go too deep into the side, if not it will make your neckline too wide. So at this point I'm going to cut a nice round neckline out of here. So with that, I have cut out your neckline. The next part is to cut that front placket that we have. But first let me open this so you can see the neckline that we have done. And if you can see my back, okay, I don't know if it's showing, and if you see my hands and see my face, I'm sweating profusely because I cannot turn on the fan because it will be noisy and you guys won't be able to hear me. So if you're watching my videos, make sure to share with people, okay, so that all this suffer, you help me out. So like the video, subscribe, share it with people that you think might be interested, so that all my sweats will go far. Thanks for watching. Let's continue. So now we've cut the neckline. The next step is to cut that front placket that will sit. So I'm going to remember that 1.5 that we cut and kept aside for this purpose. I'm going to bring it now. Alright, so that placket we have sitting down here, that's the part that will help us open up the chest. That part will be made of the green so that it gives us some contrast. So the collar and that placket will be made of the green. So let's cut the green. Now I'm going to turn over to the wrong side so that I can cut, because I'll be marking this on my chalk. So now what I want you to do is I want you to cut 5 inches, okay? 5 inches by 12, okay? I want you to cut 5 by 12 inches out. So after I've cut this part out, I'm going to iron on Estee to the wrong side of the fabric. Alright, so now after you have ironed on your interfacing, next thing I want you to do is I want you to iron it so that you fold it in half and iron it so that you get the exact center. So after ironing it, this is when you decide how you want the end of it to be. So this part we're ironing will be used to create the placket, so the part that will hold that slit. So if you want the end to be a V, this is the time to decide. If you want it to stay flat, this is the time to decide. So in my case, I want it to be a V at the end. So I'm going to simply cut a V out. Now I'm starting from nothing, and by the time I'm done cutting, the thickest part of my cut is 1 inch. Okay, you see this? The distance from here to here is 1 inch. So that's my V. So at the end of the day, this is how it's going to sit. It's supposed to sit. But one more thing before we place it there to sit, I want you to fold the edges. So you see these edges here that we have, I want you to fold in 1/2 inch on the left and 1/2 inch on the right and iron. We're supposed to do that before turning, but it's better that it's late than never. So let's fold 1/2 inch on the sides. Please make sure not to iron out the line that you've created. Now a lot of ironing will still be done later. I did that so that I just, have an idea of how it will sit at the end of the day. And for me, sorry, I didn't fold just 1/2 inch. I folded about 0.7 when I was ironing. The 1/2 inch was just a bit too small. So I folded in 0.7 to give me the length, the width that I think I'll be satisfied with at the end of the day. So now it's time to pin it down. So this is how we want it to look at the end of the day. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to put this one here on the inside. So I'm going to drop it in like so, and we're going to start to pin it. So being that we want it to sit like this, now you see where I've placed it. Now you see the center line I had on the body. You're going to align the center line I had on the body with the center line of our placket that we have underneath. So I'm going to now align them and I will pin. So you're going to need pins for this to guide. Now after all that pinning has been done, you need to decide how deep you want that cut to be. So you see that cleavage, you need to decide how much cleavage you want to show, because the deeper you go, the more cleavage you show. So what you must know is that from around, once you start coming roughly around 6.5, 7 inches after your shoulder line, you're going to start showing a little bust. So decide how deep you want it to be. So this is our shoulder line that we have over here. We're going to start from here and we're going to start coming down. Okay, so for this, I think I want to come down to around 10 inches. So I'm going to make a mark at 10 inches right there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is this. Now you see the middle line. Remember I told you when way back when we're to iron a line so that you know where the middle of the back is and middle of the front. This is one of the places where you will need to know exactly where that is. So you see this line now. Now we have a line running down the center. Let me use my chalk to mark it so you see it. We have this line running down the center. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come from the top. I'm going to I will not sew on the line. I would go like 0.2 inches, so a fraction of an inch away, not up to even a 1/4 inch. Okay, a 1/4 inch should be okay. You see the center line you have, become a 1/4 inch away. You're going to sew down, okay? And when you get to this line that we've marked for where we want the cleavage to stop, you're going to make 2 stitches, 1, 2, and then cross over to the other side and go back up. You're going to form a U, not like a U, but straight line, angle, another angle, and go back up. I'll show you what I would do after I've done it. I really do hope that you can see it. Let me see if I reduce the brightness, if it become more visible. So yeah, I started from here, stitched down, came across, and went back up. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slice it open right here, right now. So I've taken out my pins, and we're going to come from the top. Excuse me. We're going to come from up here. See what I'm doing? Cutting in between the line, not breaking my thread. I'm going to cut in between the line, like so, like so, like so. Then when we get to the end, we make a Y. When we get to the end, we create a Y. Alright. Then lay everything on the table and turn it inside out. So after ironing the center properly, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to iron both of the edges. So you see here, I'm going to fold here like so. I'm going to iron it like we did before when we were still trying to figure the whole thing out, and I'm going to iron it flat. Alright? And after I do that, I'm going to now iron the hem. So I'll iron here first, and then I'll iron here first to give it a V. So let me do that and I'll be back. So after ironing it down, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut around. So if you turn to the inside, because of how we stitched it, you might have the plackets being taller than the actual neckline that we are trying to get at the end of the day. So we're going to need to cut off any excess if we have that. Okay. So now the next step, on to cutting the collar. Alright, so to cut the collar, we're going to need to measure around the neckline. So we're going to start from here, measure around and stop here, and we're going to use that number. So measure around the neckline. Okay, so for me that number is 16 inches. So let's use 16 inches to make a collar. Now sorry, before we use that 16 inches before I show you how to cut the collar, you're going to need to use thread, and you're going to need to stitch here down. Okay, you're going to need to sew here down permanently. Alright, so yeah, after I've stitched around the neck, let's now move on to cutting the collar.